I think anyone who's talked to me long enough about films, or at least has watched enough reviews, would probably note that I'm always looking for something that feels genuine. Genuine's the perfect word. That's why I tend to gravitate towards filmmakers like Richard Linklater. And even early Kevin Smith movies to a degree. I mean, it's stylized for sure, but there's something real in that. And that's not to say there's anything wrong with a movie just being a movie. I can enjoy a popcorn flick, believe it or not. And when it comes to Derek Cianfrance, he is one of my current favorite filmmakers. And that feels like a weird thing to say because I've only seen 2 of his movies. Blue Valentine, which I think is such a great and tragic romance, and The Place Beyond the Pines. And that's a film that I think is really undervalued because, well, maybe people just weren't expecting the structure of what it was, a film about fathers and sons. And there's something about the storytelling narrative in that film that struck me as really epic. You know, I mean, people probably go see movies like Endgame and like, man, that was epic. And it is in its own way, but like a film for me that's epic, that's The Place Beyond the Pines, you know. What a sprawling story, you know. Anyway, the reason I bring him up, he did not direct this movie. No, he was working on this, what was billed as a docudrama called Metalhead, about a real-life couple and a metal band where the drummer, his hearing just started to go. And I'm like, wow, that's a fascinating concept. And not only is it a great concept in its own, but it's fascinating because it really happened. And also this filmmaker who I really love is behind it. Unfortunately, something went awry in the production of that film, and it just never saw the light of day. You know, I don't know if it was never completed or post-production issues. I don't know. It just never happened, despite, you know, hearing about it for years. So that's where Sound of Metal comes into play. And this didn't hit me until I saw this was produced by Derek Cianfrance. And I was like, wait a minute. Wasn't he working on a movie like this? So this movie is directed by Darius Marder, who wrote The Place Beyond the Pines. And this is, I believe, his film debut, theatrical debut, as a director, maybe? I don't know. If I'm wrong, I'll put a subtitle at the bottom saying he's wrong. But if I'm right, I seem more like a film snob. Anyway, so this is his picture. And apparently Derek worked with him on the story and gave him his blessing to make it, you know, into a movie. And I'm so glad he did. It stars Riz Ahmed, which, honestly, I've heard nothing but great things about the guy. The only other 2 movies I've seen him in that I can recall are Rogue One and Venom, and I didn't like either of those movies. Which is the worst one? I'll never be able to tell. Anyway, but I've heard great things about him. And then the other, the co-star of this film is Olivia Cooke, who I thought was just wonderful and beautifully tragic, and Me and Earl and the Dying Girl. Fucking love that movie, and I thought she was great in it. I think it takes a certain person to pull off someone suffering an ailment and not make it too over the top. You know, kind of like your, what's the word? Fuck. I'll think of the word and I'll just cut to it. Pandering to the audience, you know, and I think she accomplishes that well in that movie, and also in this movie, I think Riz does a great job as the central character. There's also another co-star. His name is Paul Raci. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But he also does an amazing job. And actually, all of these performances are really fantastic in this film because they're so grounded. And that's something I loved about Cianfrance's style in Blue Valentine and Place Beyond the Pines. I felt that they were grounded. They existed. The characters existed in a real world, you know. And I believe Darius kind of carries that over to this film, and I'm sure that that's in tune with his style as well. Anyway, anyway, I can't talk. Hold on a moment. That's better. So as the film opens, we're at a little bit of a rock concert, and we're listening to some metal. Now, I'm not the first person to note this, and I'm just gonna throw out there that listen, whatever genre of metal you want to define the music as that the characters play in this movie, whether it be sludge or doom, I want to say it's closer to doom. I don't know. There's so many labels when it comes to metal: post, doom, rock, shoegaze. I don't know. Anyway, whatever genre you want to classify this music as, I'm just going to throw it out there. It's not very good. And I don't think it needs to be good for the sake of the film. This is just me nitpicking because the band, whose name I cannot remember, it was a play on something. I want to say Black, wasn't it? Blackjack? No, that's Blackjack. No. Anyways, that is neither here nor there. The music just wasn't very good. From what I recall, Riz practiced drumming for 6 months. It shows. It's hard to pull off an instrument if you don't know how to play it. And I think it was a little sloppy. But again, I guess that doesn't really matter because the band they were in, Super Hype Blackjack 5000, they weren't super popular anyway. They were living out of a mobile home and picking up gigs where they could. So whatever. I'm just throwing it out there. I didn't care for the music that much. But apparently they had a hand in writing it. At least I seem to recall Olivia Cooke did. Cool for them. Anyway, the film opens with that. A little performance. We get to see kind of the, a day in the life, what they're doing. It's not a very glamorous life. That's okay. It's probably more real than... it's more real as far as what bands go through than we've seen in movies before. Not everyone is like A Star is Born and shit. And it doesn't take too long until Riz's character, Ruben, starts to experience some funky hearing loss. And it's really fucking rapid, too. And he kind of flips out about it. And we learn a little bit more that he is about 4 years sober and had a serious drug problem. So his girlfriend and band member, Lou, she helps him out and eventually gets him to a kind of like sanctuary, not exactly a clinic, but a community sponsored by like a nearby church, a deaf community that just helps out when needed, school, teaching, as far as anyone who's dealing with this kind of crisis, children growing up, hearing impaired, things like that. And that's when we meet another great character in the film, Joe, played by Paul Raci. And he's kind of that, he's the teacher, he's the guide, he's a little stern, but has a soft spot for Ruben. We've seen that role a billion times, and holy fuck, Paul pulls it off in spades, man. It's so good. He does such a wonderful job. And this film, I think the beauty of this film is like, it does a great job at kind of capturing... At first, I guess the fear, of Ruben's hearing loss. I mean, as someone who suffers from tinnitus, and my hearing's not that great to begin with, also, on top of that, I was kind of suffering a physical ailment at the time of watching this movie. And so I guess I kind of lumped in my emotions and my fear with Ruben as far as what he was going through and like the helplessness of that. And it's a very scary thing. So... the first act is almost kind of scary in a way, in a real way, like scarier than any horror movie or anything like that, because this can happen. This has happened to people. Anyway, the second act mercifully settles in this kind of community where Ruben kind of has to relearn, everything. And I think the beauty of this movie is that, as we're living, we're kind of traveling along this path. And even though there are obstacles, in the way, foreseen or unforeseen, we imagine that we're going to overcome them or avoid them and then continue on this path. But sometimes something happens where you hit that obstacle and it puts you on a new path. And as much as you want to get back to that original path, you can't. And you have to find a new way to live. And that's what this film kind of focuses on. At least that's what I gravitated towards, as the gist of the film. the story, what it was trying to tell me anyway. That's what I took from it. And during this community, we meet a lot of cool characters. And I got a very short-term 12 vibe from it, which is another fantastic movie with phenomenal performances. Definitely check it out if you haven't. And for me, there's just something comforting in these people, with no agenda other than just trying to live and help each other live and be at peace. It's almost like monks, to a degree. And that's kind of enticing. Don't get me wrong. I can't live without my technology, my Netflix, my Taco Bell. But, don't know why I said it like that. But, just to kind of sit down and calm yourself. And in fact, there's a great example of this in the film where Joe catches Ruben working on a roof. And Ruben doesn't really know what to do with himself. All he knows is what he knows. And kind of fixing things and assembling things is part of his character. So one morning he wakes up, because that's kind of his routine, getting up at like 5:30 in the morning. And he sees the roof is broken, so he goes to fix it. And Joe kind of scolds him for it. He's like, listen, I never asked you to fix this roof, man. So here's what you're going to do. I'm going to set aside a room for you. Okay, you get up whenever you want. I'll have a fresh pot of coffee, if you want that too, some donuts. And I want you to go in this room. I want you to sit there. And there's not going to be anything else in this room except a pad and paper. A pad and paper? A pad with paper. So a fucking pad and pen. Paper and pen. Pencil. It's probably, was it pen or pencil? Oh God, my fans will rake me over the coals if I don't remember that. Anyway, he tells him, he's like, listen, you're going to sit in this room, and if you find that you can't just sit there, I want you to write. Write whatever. Doesn't matter. Can't draw. Just write it. Nobody has to look at what you write. Just write. And write until you feel you can just sit there and not do anything. And I think there's a really integral message in that. In the process where you're trying to overcome something drastic that has happened in your life and you're trying to heal. But sometimes when we're faced with that, we just try to busy ourselves with work or going out with friends or this or that. I know I've been guilty of that for sure. I give myself work to do all the time when it's needless, It's the idea of feeling guilty, like because you're not working on something or doing something that's adding to something. So I think that was such a strong message to try to instill in the view, not only in Ruben, but the viewer. It's like, listen, sometimes you just got to fucking sit there and just internalize what's happened, what you're going through, And I thought it was, again, like a beautiful series of scenes. As the film progresses, Ruben looks into getting cochlear implants. Now, this is where some errors come into the play as far as the story, as far as other people's experience, not only with hearing loss, but getting cochlear implants. Now, as far as Ruben is concerned, he raises the money to get them, and he gets them installed. And when he first hears it, it's a very tinny metal sound. Is that title making sense now? And he's caught off guard by this. And the doctor's like, listen, you're never going to have hearing like it once was. This is kind of it. Give your brain time to adjust to this. And so he kind of does. However, if you talk to anyone in the kind of deaf community, obviously there's some things glossed over. Like, for example, Ruben would have been explained what the process was. I've been told that he's got these giant scars on the back of his head, and that's no longer a thing. That was kind of like an ancient thing. But it's stylistic for the film. And I always say when I'm watching a movie, I'm not watching it. It needs to be a movie first and foremost. It's a form of entertainment. If it can whip in a little message, great. But I don't think it's there to present the facts as is at the time it was being filmed. Of course, there are, varying degrees which you can, I guess change some things. But this is change that I was okay with. I think it got the broad strokes of the story across. But again, you're going to find a lot of people who disagree with that, and I'm like, oh, that was factually inaccurate. This is bullshit. Fuck this movie. Fuck Sound of Metal. Fuck Ruben. Fictional character. People are like that. Just tell them about Rose. Anyway, I don't think the inaccuracies impeded Ruben's journey as far as the film is concerned. So as long as you understand that, I think it's fine. Anyway, I'm not going to spoil the end of the movie, but suffice it to say, I think there's some beautiful moments as far as Ruben's realization of what his life is becoming. I think there's some great scenes, especially the final scenes with Olivia Cooke or Lou, as far as their relationship goes. We see relationships in films all the time, and of course a lot of it is sensationalized, because it has to be. You got 2 hours to sit down and get like the gamut of this relationship. But I think I felt something very genuine in the relationship between Ruben and Lou. It's something very real, especially in those final scenes, which I loved. And I kind of loved like the outcome of the film. Now, I don't want to like give the like last scenes away. Not that it's like a huge big thing. But I think, again, even if there was inaccuracies as far as, what Ruben was going through, I think it was important to his journey. And I love seeing that growth. And I loved just kind of sitting there and letting the movie digest for me. A lot of these times when I do these reviews, it's the same day, if not like an hour or two after I've seen the movie. Because I like to talk to you when all the ideas are still fresh. And that's easier when a movie sucks, because I was like, oh, fuck this and fuck this too, But the Sound of Metal, it's just Sound of Metal. I want to throw a "the" in the front of it so badly. Sound of Metal is something I wanted to digest a little bit and kind of internalize for myself. That's the dog scratching at the door. Hold on. Okay, she's laying down. You gotta be quiet, though. Mike will pick you up. Train of thought derailed. So, again, just to reiterate, this is the kind of movie that speaks more to my level. So I think that'll give you a good baseline of like what kind of movies I enjoy. It's kind of those intimate and genuine experiences that feel real, that are grounded. Riz Ahmed gives a wonderful performance, and I've read that some people were like, it wasn't anything special. I think you got to look a little bit deeper than what most movies do, which is sensationalize, because that's what most movies are, and that's fine for those movies. But this is a very real and intimate story, and it has something important to say, and it's a beautiful message. That again, sometimes we're traveling on that path, and an obstacle happens, something happens and changes everything forever, and we got to learn to be okay with that. But the important thing is that we will learn to be okay with that. We will find a way to live and just to sit and be at peace. And I think that's a beautiful point. Now I got to show Delilah because she came in earlier. Otherwise, what's it all for? Doesn't mean anything. All right, Delilah. Time for you to shine. There she is. Hey, puppers. You're precious.